We now go live to Max Blumenthal for more on what happened today at the OAS. Max, really quickly, we just saw you asking the question, how did the panel respond to you?
They responded with a non-answer, basically deflected. Mr. Canton said, I was only at the National Democratic Institute until 1998, and I'm proud of my work. And Kotler just said everything I said was false. Well, it wasn't false. Erwin Kotler took to Twitter to blame the government of the Gaza Strip for Israel's killing of 62 protesters in one day. He spent his whole career defending Israeli human rights crimes, and he is apparently a key member of not only this panel, but of the panel of the so-called experts that produced this report. Kotler also accused Venezuela's government of over 6,000 extrajudicial executions, and he said that Venezuela was responsible for the worst humanitarian crisis in Latin American history, in the whole history of Latin America. So I found that the panel was extremely propagandistic, and I didn't get a response to my question.
Now, really quickly, just tell us what actually happened today at that OAS meeting.
Well, you just heard accusation after accusation from the panelists against Venezuela with wildly conflicting statistics. The very few of their sources were provided. There were no critical questions were faced by the panelists, but I went to provide journalistic context for anyone in the audience and anyone watching to demonstrate that not only was this panel not an independent panel as it was sold and promoted by the Organization of American States, but that the Organization of American States is holding one panel after another, including coming up at the general session, attempting to promote regime change in Venezuela. This panel was aiming to put Nicolas Maduro, the elected president of Venezuela, on trial before the International Criminal Court. And this is, the Organization of American States is something that Latin American taxpayers have to pay into. So it makes perfect sense that Venezuela would no longer want to be a member, considering the charade that was on display today.
Now, Max, I understand that while this meeting was taking place, they issued a 387-page report. Do you have the report? I mean, explain to me, if they're having this panel discussion, shouldn't the contents of the panel discussion be made into the report? Explain to me the process, because I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I don't know the process, and I haven't. The report was not distributed at the press conference. On the cover of the report is sort of a famous violinist who's affiliated with the opposition, Willie Garcia, who's now at a right-wing conference promoting regime change in Oslo, Norway, called the Oslo Freedom Forum. I don't believe that any violations committed by the opposition, and we know of many, were included in the report. And the report appears to be part and parcel of the regime change agenda emanating out of Washington, but I was not made aware of its contents, and it was not distributed at the event.
Now, really quickly, the OAS is recommending that Venezuela be placed in front of the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. What do you think about that request from the OAS, and how do you think the International Criminal Court will respond to this potential case against Venezuela?
You know, I have no idea, but I noticed that the International Criminal Court tends to prosecute figures who are in the crosshairs of the West, and particularly the United States. I refer to it as the ACC rather than the ICC because most of the figures they put on trial are African, so that you could call it the African Criminal Court. But I don't know if they'll take this up. The sourcing in this document needs to be closely examined, and as we've seen, from the attempts to promote regime change in places like Syria, so much of the sourcing in, for example, Human Rights Watch reports condemning Syria, or reports by the U.S. or British government. So many of those sources are paid by the U.S. They're paid members of the opposition, and here we saw one of the panelists representing an organization funded by the State Department that pays opposition groups in Venezuela. So there's absolutely no way that we can receive this report as impartial, and that needs to be considered if it is brought before the ICC. I don't know if it will.
Thank you so much, Max Blumenthal. We've been speaking to the independent journalist, Max Blumenthal, about the OAS report on Venezuela.